The members of the Nanjing group looked at each other with a smile. Several members had just come out of the instance. They watched for a moment before busying themselves with their own affairs. Only a thin young woman followed Chai Rong as they walked with Fu Wensheng towards Fu Wenduo. It was the first time Tang Mo had seen the legendary captain of the Nanjing group, Chai Rong. He was a tall and young man who wasn't particularly honestly. He had a normal appearance, simple and honest. As Xiao Jitong said, the ground trembled slightly when Chai Rong stepped on the ground due to a powerful and heavy force. Some people's strong power was restrained, such as Fu Wenduo. His power was hidden deep inside and unable to be detected. Chai Rong was different. His ability was a strength enhancement one. It was similar to the bald man who could turn into a bear during the circus instance. Tang Mo stared at the young captain only to notice a gaze and look down. He saw that Fu Wensheng was looking at Tang Mo with a complicated expression. The boy was only 12 years old and there wasn't much expression on his face. Seeing Fu Wenduo was already enough to surprise him, but seeing Tang Mo was completely beyond Fu Wensheng's imagination. He never thought that he would encounter Tang Mo in his life, and now Tang Mo stood with Fu Wensheng's super scary cousin. It was something he couldn't think about. He didn't know if he should be more surprised by Fu Wenduo finding him or Tang Mo's presence. Fu Wensheng thought this and shifted his gaze. Captain, this isn't my brother but my cousin. He is my cousin. Fu Wensheng's voice reached Fu Wenduo. He tried to give Fu Wenduo a wink as he talked. Fu Wenduo raised an eyebrow and quickly said to Chai Rong, I am Fu Wengxian. Chai Rong didn't think too much and laughed. Haha, I am the captain of the Nanjing group, Chai Rong. It is rare to find relatives. I will leave the two of you to speak alone. Chai Rong pushed the child over. Fu Wensheng reluctantly walked to Fu Wenduo's side and stood obediently. Chai Rong smiled. Xiao Sheng is embarrassed to see his loved one. Then he turned away with the young woman. Chai Rong didn't show any traces of abnormalities when leaving, but the woman by his side gazed at Fu Wenduo and Tang Mo several times. Chai Rong was relieved when Fu Wensheng admitted that this was his relative. Xiao Jitong gave a guarantee, so things had stabilized by 90%. Now Chai Rong was very happy that Fu Wensheng met his relative. Once they walked away, Tang Mo's line of sight moved from Chai Rongji back to Fu Wensheng. Fu Wensheng was looking at his cousin helplessly. He found Tang Mo looking at himself and quietly peeked at Tang Mo. Then he shifted his gaze towards Fu Wenduo. After waiting a long time for Fu Wenduo to speak, the child whispered, Brother, how are you here? I thought you were out on a mission. Fu Wenduo looked lightly at his cousin. It was too far for you to turn me into 8 pieces of meat. Fu Wensheng, looking at the child's expression, Tang Mo suddenly realized how Fu Wenduo bullied his little cousin. It was a bad idea to talk here, so the three of them reached the place where Fu Wensheng had been resting. It was a small room with simple bed furniture. After the Earth went online, the players' quality of life wasn't high and there was no need for too much sleep. They didn't need too much in the place where they rested. Once Fu Wensheng entered the room, he spoke honestly. Many things didn't need to be explained as the three people could guess them. Fu Wensheng was a member of the Nanjing group and had been involved in many instances with his teammates for 4 months. He couldn't conceal his name. His name was very uncommon and Fu Wenduo's name was also uncommon. It was easy for people to associate them. Fu Wenduo's identity was somewhat awkward in China. Everyone knew that pulling players into the game wasn't his wish and that even without him, eventually there would be a player who opened the tower attack game. However, people still felt emotional towards Fu Wenduo. Fu Wensheng saying he didn't know Fu Wenduo was to protect himself. When Fu Wenduo stood in front of Fu Wensheng, he guessed that Fu Wenduo was hiding his identity. That's why when Chai Rong asked for an introduction, Fu Wensheng only said that Fu Wenduo was his cousin and didn't mention his name. A wise person might sense something strange from Fu Wensheng's performance, but most people wouldn't think too much. Tang Mo wondered, who was that woman just now? She was standing with your captain. Fu Wensheng replied, she is a member of the Nanjing group called Su Yang. Sister Rong is very powerful. She seems to have sensed something about our identity. Tang Mo's tone was certain. Fu Wensheng was surprised. He thought that he had acted perfectly after seeing Fu Wenduo. He whispered, it is possible since Sister Rong is very smart. Still, she probably just feels some doubt and shouldn't guess who brother is. The atmosphere in the room finally eased. The child was still very nervous when he looked at Fu Wenduo while Fu Wenduo was calm. After letting Fu Wensheng watch him for a long time, Fu Wenduo wished and said, what happened to you after the Earth went online? Fu Wensheng gulped and roughly talked about what he experienced in the past 4 months. Nanjing wasn't peaceful at first. 4 months ago, the Black Tower announced that the game had begun and tens of thousands of people disappeared. The surviving players were filled with panic. Just like Shanghai, the people of Nanjing were wary of all strangers and looked for their surviving friends and relatives. Grandpa and grandmother, they were both gone. I heard a noise in the morning and went downstairs to see everyone in the house was gone. I didn't dare go out and stayed in the villa for a few days. Then, Fu Wensheng's voice stopped and he couldn't help looking down. I was later pulled by brother into the tower attack game. Chai Rong had a sudden rise 2 weeks after the Earth went online. He gradually set up the Nanjing group and then the Nanjing strategy group formed. Fu Wensheng joined the Nanjing group after 1 month. He might be young but he was smart and obedient. He often teamed up with Chai Rong to participate in the games and became familiar with the Nanjing group. I wanted to look for you but I didn't know where you are. Captain Xiao guessed that China District 1 is Beijing but Beijing was too far away. It wasn't good for me to go alone so I stayed here. Brother, you found me this time, is it because of him? Fu Wenzheng looked at Tang Mo and answered himself. Is it that gem corridor? The child was still as smart as before. Tang Mo smiled. Don't you know that your name makes it easy for people to make an association? Fu Wenzheng was surprised. I tried very hard to dispel that idea. Tang Mo didn't deny it. If Tang Mo didn't know Fu Wenduo, he wouldn't think there was a relationship between Fu Wenduo and Fu Wenzheng. China was really big and this name was rare, but there were still people with the name. The child's matters were finished and it was time for Tang Mo and Fu Wenduo. Fu Wenduo's experience was known to all Chinese players. He said directly, I went to Shanghai to find something and met my current teammate, Tang Mo. We are going to Beijing now. Fu Wenduo didn't say anything else as he looked down at his cousin. The child's eyes slightly widened when he heard that Fu Wenduo was going to Beijing but he soon calmed down. China District 1 was Beijing but Fu Wenduo was in China District 2 when he cleared the Black Tower's second floor last month. Xiao Jitong speculated that China District 2 was Shanghai. Originally, Fu Wenzheng was excited when he heard that his cousin was in Shanghai. The two of them were close to each other so the odds of meeting were greater. But once he saw Fu Wenduo, he understood. Fu Wenduo could go from Beijing to Shanghai and from Shanghai to Nanjing. This meant he had the means to return to Beijing. Beijing was Fu Wenduo's base and he would go back. Fu Wenduo didn't speak and quietly waited for Fu Wenzhen's answer. Tang Mo looked at the cousins and walked out of the room, leaving space for Fu Wenduo and Fu Wenzheng to talk. Would he go or not? That was Fu Wenduo's question to Fu Wenzheng. Before coming to Nanjing, Fu Wenduo thought Fu Wenzheng was alone in Nanjing and definitely wouldn't hesitate to take Fu Wenzheng away. However, Fu Wenzheng might not necessarily leave if he had his own team. His team was also the strong Nanjing group. The Nanjing group was safe and stable. Fu Wenzheng seemed to be having a good time here and it wasn't important for Fu Wenduo to take him away. Tang Mo stood outside the door and looked up at the blue sky. He thought about whether he should go to practice shooting or wait for the child's answer. At this time, he suddenly remembered Fu Wenzhen's frightened expression and when he said he would turn Fu Wenduo into meat sauce. Surely Fu Wenduo won't hit his cousin. Tang Mo laughed after saying this. After spending a long time in the cozy city of Nanjing, his mood calmed down a lot. Tang Mo was waiting for the results of the two people in the room. Suddenly, his eyes narrowed and he strode to the end of the corridor, looking at the pentagram made of white light in the sky. At almost the same time, a loud cannon sound came from the west and the sound shook the house. The door opened and Fu Wenduo walked out, quickly heading towards Tang Mo. Fu Wenduo also followed. Once he saw the white star in the sky, he cried out with surprise, something happened. In the Nanjing group space, more than 10 players exited the house and looked towards the sky in the west. Chai Rong strode out and saw the shining star. Xiao Jitong. The author has something to say, Tang Tang, am I the type of person who will hand a whip to old Fu? It was the author who slandered me in the small theater. It's all OOC. Old Fu, am I the type of person to bully my brother? Tang Tang and readers, you really are. Xiao Fu, hey. You can also join my Discord channel to chat with fellow readers about the novels.